You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, the official podcast of the Love the Darts magazine. I'm Alex Moss, and once again I'm joined by my co-host Burton DeWitt. Burton, how you doing?
Just spending a normal day in a hurricane. How are you?
Yeah, a little bit better. No hurricanes at this end, fortunately, but good show lined up for you guys this week. We've got Vincent van Voort on as our guest for this week, so I look forward to that a little bit later on. But firstly, we're going to be looking back at the Perth Darts Masters, the final leg of the World Series events down under. Gary Anderson picking up the title, his first title win in Australia, beating Raymond van Barneveld 11-7 in the final on Sunday, and he moves top of the World Series order of merit, going ahead of Michael van Gerwen on those rankings. So what does this win mean for Gary?
I think it's a big win for him because he hasn't won a World Series event now in a couple months since I believe Dubai was the last one he won. But it also moves him top of the table. And he should have topped the table last year, got caught in the last event by Michael van Gerwen, as Michael van Gerwen topped everything last year. And to finish, even though, yes, MVG has skipped 3 of these events, to finish number 1, not a guarantee yet, he still needs to do well in Germany in order to top the table. But to top the table would mean a lot for Gary Anderson. It's been a few years since he topped something. He topped the Pro Tour Order of Merit a few years ago on his way to winning his first World Championship. But that's really the last time he has, and now he has that opportunity to do so here. He also has the opportunity to do it in the Players' Championship Order of Merit, although he has to catch Daryl Gurney there. Beyond that, though, it's just another title for him. He's used to winning these World Series events. He'll probably pass Phil Taylor next year for the second most since Phil Taylor's retiring. I think as a title, it doesn't really mean much, but I think he wants to be able to say he's number 1 in something, and right now he is in the World Series table.
Yeah, definitely. It's good for him to get back to winning ways. When we were previewing this triple header of World Series events in New Zealand and Australia, we were looking at players who were wanting to make the most of Michael van Gerwen not being there and pick up titles. Peter Wright was one of them, and Gary Anderson going in as the top seed for all 3 of the events. If he'd have not come away with a title, he'd have been definitely disappointed not to have done so. And before this past weekend, he hadn't even got to a semi-final of the 2 events so far. He had a couple of close defeats to Kyle Anderson in Auckland, who went on to win the title, and then Daryl Gurney, another defeat to him in a TV game in the quarterfinals in Melbourne. So good for him to get back to winning ways, and he looked like one of the best players throughout the whole weekend. Was really troubled in his first couple of games. I think he won 6 legs in a row to beat Simon Whitlock in the quarterfinals from 5-4 down, and then a good win against James Wade in the semis, and then that win in another great final we've seen this year against Barney, a player who we're going to talk about in a moment. So yeah, good for him, and he'll be looking to finish number 1 on the World Series Order of Merit, but he's got to have a decent run in Germany because Michael van Gerwen will be coming back, and he'll be desperate to add a World Series title to its collection before the finals in Glasgow.
Now, speaking of Barney, of course, beat Raymond van Barneveld 11-7 in the final. Now, along the way there, Barneveld was pushed the distance all 3 times. First by Corey Cadby in the first round, then by Phil Taylor, then by Daryl Gurney. But he won all 3 matches in last leg deciders, and it's the best result for him on TV in quite some time. I think it's his first final since Auckland in 2015. Can Barney kick on from here and make the second half of 2017 a big second half for him?
I think he'd like to think so. He's the move from unicorn to target's well documented a couple of months ago. I think his first tournament was the US Darts Masters, where he switched from his unicorn darts to his target darts. And we know from past experiences, it can take a long time for them switching manufacturers to hit their stride again. It was a bit of a strange time into it a couple of weeks before the World Match Play, but this run to the finals evidence that he's starting to get some confidence with those new darts. He's starting to produce the sort of levels that we've seen from him before. 101, almost 102 average in that final. He produced probably the best game he's produced since switching from unicorn to target. So yeah, that's going to give him a lot of confidence going into the rest of the year now with them darts, and that's a big thing when you're switching manufacturers, is can you go up to that stage confident with your equipment? And I think this run's definitely done that for him. He's come through 3 deciders to get through to the final. Corey Cadby, Phil Taylor and Daryl Gurney, and in them games he has been really, really pushed. The Cadby game especially, when I've got to give a mention to Cadby getting that 161 when he was 5-4 down to force that decider, and then I think correct me if I'm wrong, he had the darts in that deciding leg. So it was a big game for him to get through that and get revenge. It puts him in good stead for the rest of the year.
I agree. And, he's getting used to the darts now. As you said, it's been about 2 months since the switch. And it was a weird set of matches for him. I mean, you go back to that first match against Cadby. He had a big lead, missed a dart to win 6-3, missed a couple more to win 6-4, then had to break through. I think he had 3 match darts before he eventually won it. Well, then against Phil Taylor, it's more of the same. He missed 4 darts to win the match. I believe he was up. I think it was up at one point 11-8. He had the darts to win it though 11-9, and he missed 4, and again had to break in the deciding leg. Against Del Gurney, it was the opposite. He was behind a lot, came back, and had to break again in the deciding leg. This time, Gurney missed 3 darts for the match. So it was 2 matches that were a bit of the same, and one match that was a little bit different where he came from behind. But it shows, I think, that his head's in the right place. He's taken his opportunities. He's come from situations where he thought he had it done, looked like he had blown it, and still stepped up and threw in a fantastic final leg. That's not the Barney we have seen the last few years. We've seen him wilt under pressure. We've seen him play like he says that doesn't have it, that it's just not there anymore. Well, we know it is still there. We've seen how good he is. This was the first time we really saw it. The Gurney match wasn't his best, but he had some good performances outside of that. And especially that match against Phil Taylor and against Corey Cadby, when he had the lead, blew it, missed the match darts, and came in and threw a big leg against the darts. I think that's going to be big for his confidence going forward. Yeah, he lost the final, but he averaged almost 102 in the final. I think this is good news for Raymond van Barneveld and fans of Raymond van Barneveld, and I think he might have another big run in him going forward.
Away from the finalists in Perth, and another player we've got to give a mention to, and that's James Wade getting to another semi-final. Do you think he's coming back into a bit of form now?
It's tough to say, but I mean, he can't. Well, we'd like to think he can't play as poorly as he has the last few months. He made it to the semifinals in Perth and made a good account of himself along the way. He averaged over 100 against Michael Smith, and it's not the first time he's averaged over 100 in these World Series events. And it's the first time, really, we've seen him play very well on TV since early in the Premier League when he had that hot start, when he had that beautiful performance against Michael Van Gerwen. Granted, he lost, but we saw about 6 months where he really struggled, where he went 7 matches without winning across all competitions, something he's only done once before in his 14-year career. So we've seen him reach lows that we hadn't seen. It's going to be different when we get into the ranking events. How's he going to do in the European Tour events if he qualifies? He has that opportunity to qualify if he wants to the Dutch Darts Masters. He can go to the European qualifier because of the rule change. He had missed the UK qualifier to play the World Series events. That could be a big opportunity for him. Obviously, the Grand Prix, where he's always done well. Until we see him in the ranking events, it's tough to know whether he is on the way back. But he's had a few performances over the last 3 weeks that he hasn't come close to in almost 6 months, or at least 4 months. So that's got to be positive signs for him.
Yeah, I've got to agree. There's some signs for James Wade going into the rest of the year. I know before these World Series events kicked off in Auckland, there are people saying, why is James Wade being picked for these events? He's not a player who's in good form, and they were thinking maybe him instead of Dave Chisnell should have been the player to miss out and make way for Michael Smith. But in the end, he has been picked, and I think he's gave a decent account of himself over the last 3 weeks. 2 semi-finals and a quarter-final. He's had a couple of good wins as well. One over Michael Smith in the recent one in Perth, as you say, 101 average. And yeah, it's good signs for him, but I think a lot is going to depend, as you said, on the ranking events. That's where he's going to claw back that deficit that he's made in the order of merit. He dropped out of the top 8 for the first time in a decade after that early exit world match play, so he's put in some good performances, go deep in them quarterfinals, semi-finals, if he's going to get back that top 8. And really, when he's on form, he's a player who is a top 8 player, so a big few months coming up for him, and he'll take plenty of positives from how he's performed in some of the games in New Zealand and Australia over the last few weeks.
Now, moving on, looking back, or I shouldn't say moving on, but looking back overall at the last 3 World Series events down under, You had on the website, of course, your own rankings, but I think we should talk about them a little on the show as well. Who gets, of the 10 players in the PDC, including Corey Cadby, who gets your highest marks from those last 3 events?
Yeah, that's right. I've done a little story on the website just to plug for that. I've rated, as you say, them 10 players out of 10 on their performances over the last 3 weeks, including the events in Auckland, Melbourne and Perth. The player I've given the highest rating to is Kyle Anderson. I gave him 9 out of 10. All right, he had those couple of first-round exits in the last 2 events, but the first event, winning it in Auckland, he was a surprise winner. I think 50-1 outsider to win the tournament. So for him, he's got to have taken the most out of these last few weeks down under. So for me, the top ranked player is Kyle Anderson.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I mean, you mentioned those 2 first-round exits, but look at who he drew. He drew in Perth, he drew Phil Taylor, and missed the trick. He had the early lead, but Phil Taylor played very well in getting past him. And then the other one in Melbourne, he averaged nearly 104 and lost 6-1. There's not much he could have done. Simon Whitlock was just fantastic, averaged over 110 for almost the entire match. I think he was up around 112 entering the final leg. The last leg was a bit of a letdown compared to the rest, but there wasn't much Kyle Anderson could have done about that. In Auckland, he was fantastic, and he ran into players in form and made a good account of himself in the other 2. The other person I'd say is Corey Cadby. Cadby, of course, made the final in Auckland, losing to Kyle Anderson, but made a good account of himself after that. He beat Raymond van Barneveld in Melbourne, lost to Phil Taylor in a good match there, and then lost another good match coming from behind, never giving up. He seemed out of it. I think he was 4-0 down, 5-3, kept going at it, came back, forced the last leg decider, and Barney threw in a great leg against him. Of course, that 1-6-1. Those are my top 2. I'll also throw in Gary Anderson, who won a title and played really well over the 3 weeks.
And how about at the other end of the spectrum? Who got the lowest marks for you?
I have to say Michael Smith, and we were curious how he would perform since this was going to be his debut in the World Series events, and he didn't play poorly by any stretch of the imagination, which makes it hard to say it's low grade. But remember, we're now talking about there's 8 invitational spots. Yes, Kyle Anderson got in as well. Simon Whitlock, being Australian, was given in, so there was really 7 spots up for grabs. And after Auckland, Michael Smith really didn't look up to the task. He was brilliant in that first match against Rob Szabo. He played well against Corey Cadby in the quarterfinals in Auckland, but after that, he was just okay. He didn't look like a player who should have been getting these invites. Now, if you look at his form heading into this, he absolutely deserved these. He had gone out and earned them. He had been one of the form, if not the form player in the European Tour this year, behind really just Peter Wright and Michael Van Geuren, winning a title, making another final, and consistently doing well in the European Tour events. And it showed that he had the game on the stage to merit it. But his performances over the past 3 weeks, it didn't seem like it. And I had to give him the lowest marks for that reason.
Yeah, Michael Smith was mine as well. I gave him 6 out of 10. If we had to convert his performances on the World Series to a golf score, it'd probably be par, because he's won the games that we expected him to win, and he's lost the games that we probably expected him to lose. So got past the first round against the regional qualifiers. You mentioned that game against Rob Szabo, 103 average in his World Series debut, first game, and we thought this was going to be the time over the next few weeks where he does make that big breakthrough, but it never quite happened for him. A defeat to Cadby in the quarterfinals after that, and then losing out in the quarterfinals the next 2 weeks as well. So he didn't quite make that next step to the semi-finals. He had a cracking game with Peter Wright in Melbourne, losing out the last leg decider. So that 103 average in the last leg decider will probably be his main highlights that he'll take away from this trip. But he's still got, I think, a bit of work to do if he's going to make the Premier League next year. Yet we've seen players like Gurney who have done superb in the World Series over the last few months and boosted their chances of a Premier League call-up for next year. But I think Bully Boy's got to do a little bit more over the next few months if he's going to be in contention for the Premier League next year.
Now moving on to some darts outside the PDC this weekend, though not to the BDO, for an open event, the Red Dragon Champion of Champions, which was held in Cardiff this past week. We, of course, had Alex Hughes, the 11-year-old Irish sensation on last week. He went out in the first round. A bunch of PDC players were in it. Robert Owen, Jonny Clayton, Matthew Edgar, former tour card holder Steve Brown, former guest on the podcast Darren Johnson. But in the end, the final was Paul Hogan against Jonny Clayton. Jonny Clayton, the reigning champion, but he lost 2-0 as Paul Hogan took out, I believe, a 164 finish in that match and beat him 2-0. Of course, we've had Paul Hogan on this show as well. How or where would Paul Hogan rank, in your opinion, if he had ever decided to go in and make it a full-time career? Where would he be in the PDC right now?
Right now, I think there's definitely a strong argument to say that he'd easily be in the top 64, pushing towards that top 32. We've only seen brief glimpses of him this year because, as we know, he doesn't play even the full BDO circuit due to work. The only way we really see him at the moment is if he comes through the qualifiers for Lakeside and qualifies for the World Championship, as he has a couple of times before, or if he wins one of the Riley's qualifiers for the UK Open, which he's done very well in the last few years. But from just those glimpses that we've seen, definitely he could be a PDC tour card holder and be in that top 64, top 32. We've seen him most recently in the UK Open, the wins against Adrian Lewis and Gary Anderson back-to-back, beating two former world champions, one on the big stage, one on the board two. So he's definitely got the game to compete on the big stage. It's just a shame, really, that he's not been able to make a career of it and not get that, I suppose, maybe sponsors what he was looking for, or someone to back him to make that big jump over and go on to the PDC circuit full time. But for me, definitely, I think he'd be right in amongst in that top 64, pushing for the top 32.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he would be in the top 32. If you look at the people he's beaten, he doesn't play that many tournaments. He's beaten Jamie Hughes this year. He's beaten, of course, Adrian Lewis, Gary Anderson, Jamie Lewis, Keegan Brown, all at the UK Open. He beat Martin Phillips at Lakeside. Should have beaten Glenn Durant, who became world champion at Lakeside. And he doesn't play that many of these events. Now, of course, he beats Jonny Clayton, who's a player who's moving towards the top 32 after beating Robert Owen, who's another tour card holder, a very good player just outside the top 64 in the semifinals. He's, no one's surprised when we see him getting through these, and he's done it before at the UK Open. He's done it before at Lakeside. He's twice World Championship quarterfinalist. He's just never made it his full-time career. It's just a hobby for him. And it's, in a way, sad because we'd like to see more of him. He's a fantastic player. I think he's a top 32 player in the PDC. If it were his full-time thing, I think he could go even higher. But he's not. And the glimpses we see, it's just glimpses, but they're very talented glimpses. And this was just another one of these. It might be the biggest title he's ever won when you consider the difficulty of this event. But it's a fantastic achievement.
As you mentioned, he beat Jonny Clayton in the final, who was looking to become the first player to win the champions back-to-back. But how impressive is it, given the short format of this tournament, that he was able to make it to the final 2 years in a row?
I think it's really impressive. Especially, there's probably a dozen tour card holders in the field, and certainly others tried to qualify because you have to go through, it's champion of champions because you have to win a qualifying event, and there's 256 of them just to get there. And then, of course, you have to win 8 matches, all of which are best out of 3 legs, and over best out of 3 legs, anything can happen, except, I wouldn't win. But almost anyone else can. And if you look back in the history of the News of the World on which this is modeled, it was very rare for anyone to repeat. It was rare that someone won it twice, let alone 2 years in a row. Tom Barrett in the 1960s did it, Eric Bristow in the early 80s, and Mike Gregory in the late 80s, and they were the only ones to do it. And especially Bristow and Gregory are two of the bigger names in the history. But a lot of other top players couldn't do it because it's a format that isn't conducive to that. You lose 2 legs in a match, you're out. To get through to the finals 2 years in a row, especially nowadays when the quality of the field is as good and the number of very good players is as high as it is, that's a fantastic achievement. And it really, a lot of people undersell Jonny Clayton as a darts player. He's just missed out on qualification for the match play in the Grand Prix. But what does that mean? That means in the PDC he's probably the 33rd or 34th best player. That makes him a very good player, and this just shows it.
I agree. It's a great achievement, and he's won 7 games on that day, all best of 3 format, cutthroat format, where you've got to be on it straight away. If you have a poor leg, then you're 1-0 down, maybe even against the darts in the second leg, and all someone's got to do is throw in a 12 dart or 15 dart, and you're heading home. So he's won 7 games in a row to get to that final. But before that, all the players had to come through a qualifier across the UK. They had 256 qualifiers in pubs and clubs, a bit like Riley's, but a lot more of them. Winners of those came through to the finals in Cardiff. So he's had to win X amount of games in that as well to qualify for the event. So a big achievement for him. And yeah, I'm hopefully looking forward to this event next year and maybe going to see it, because the standard of players, as you say, is growing higher year on year. And I know the winner Gerwin Price wasn't in the field for the finals. I don't know if because he's been a lot more involved in the World Series and other events, he didn't enter a qualifier. But if he didn't lost out, then that's another example of how strong this competition is becoming now. Now we'll come on to our interview for this week's podcast, and it's with Vincent van der Voort.
I'm joined today by Vincent van der Voort. Vincent, how are you?
Good, and you? Thank you.
I'm doing well. Thank you for agreeing to come on this week. Now, starting, we'll look back. You switched over to the PDC in 2007, the same year as Michael van Gerwen and Jelle Clausen, 1 year after Raymond van Barneveld. Did Barney's success his first year in the PDC play a role in that, or was it always a goal of yours to switch over to the PDC?
It was a little bit different than that. We were playing in the BDO, and we had several TV tournaments in Holland. And when Raymond switched, he was our main man in Holland. And television and everything was around him. So once Raymond switched, the interest goes to the PDC as well, from TV point of view, sponsors' point of views. So that's made us decide to switch over as well.
Now, your first major in the PDC was the UK Open, and you beat Terry Jenkins and Colin Osborne in last leg deciders all the way to the final. Did you expect to hit the ground running and make a final that quickly in the PDC?
No, of course not. No. We were just going over, and everything was new for us. And the beginning was, it's pretty hard because you're playing so many good guys in the first rounds already. And in the BDO, it was always, sometimes you have a tough draw in the beginning, but most of the time you get 2-3 rounds to settle in the tournament, and then you have to perform. And now from that moment on, when we switched, we had to play well from the first round. And so that I made the final in UK Open was a massive bonus for me, especially because it was also the first year of the Grand Slam. So you get picked for more tournaments.
Now, you've made it into the top 16 in the PDC on a couple different occasions. I believe the first time was in 2011. You made it again a couple years ago. What clicked for you during those seasons?
Oh, that is hard for me to answer because of injuries and stuff like that pulled me back. I always had lots of injuries on my back, and that changed my throw. It has changed my stand, and I had to change so many things, and then you have to adjust to it. And every time I thought I was settled in, and now I couldn't make it become better and better, something happened, and it's not all of that. And then you have form, and you get ability, everything. It's not that easy to stay in a top 16 or come back at one point.
Now, what's the hardest part about playing with an injured back, do you think?
With a little bit of pain to play with is not a problem. I've been playing with pain for probably 10 years now. But it's just when it comes to the point that you can't stand normal anymore, and that the pain takes over. So I'm constantly thinking about it during the game.
Now,
that is the most difficult part about it, because when you play, you want to just focus on beating your opponent, and not that you have to stand different or that you can't handle it anymore.
Is it still affecting you right now, or right now is it getting better?
It's getting better. I mean, I will never be 100% again. That is not possible. But I'm going to the gym a lot now, and we make the muscles around it a lot stronger. So the pain doesn't take over anymore. It's just there's a little bit of pain, but that's something I can handle. And if it stays like this, I will be very happy.
Now, you said at the Worlds last year that you were considering retirement. I think you clarified after that that you meant that you might not be able to keep playing. How close were you to calling it a day then?
It wasn't like I was packing in straight away. I just said, if it doesn't improve, then I will pack it in, because then you don't have, you got nothing to look for in the PDC. Then you can rather stop. Then I'm not somebody who goes to tournaments just to be there and be first round, second round. Every tournament goes out. Then I can't do that. So you have to go to a tournament and think you can play against the best guys. And you can give them a game and win sometimes. And in the World Championship, I went there, and it was just, I was there only because it's the World, and not because I thought I had a chance to beat anybody. It was just everything I'd done, everything I hit was luck. That's how I felt at that moment. And I thought, I don't want to continue like this. So something has to change, or else I will stop. And that's still the same right now. If it doesn't go better, the bag is now all right. But if that doesn't make me come back to my old form or results, then I will pack it in. And that's it.
Now, so far this year, you had a bit of a slow start, but in the last few months, you've been putting in some good performances on the European Tour. You've averaged over 100 a couple times. You beat Adrian Lewis in a high-quality match. What do you think has sparked that start to return to form in the last few months?
It's because my back is a little bit better. It's not only that. It's because I went to the gym a lot, and in the beginning, your muscles hurt because they're not used to having that much of pressure on them, and you're constantly lifting weights and you're making it stronger. So the muscles hurt in the beginning, and it was that affected my darts a little bit. But I just, and then that went better, but then you don't have any confidence anymore because you're not winning any rounds, but the back is getting better, but you don't have confidence. So you're losing matches you shouldn't have lost to play sometimes, and that makes it difficult. And that's in the position where I'm in right now. I'm playing really well. I feel really good, but now the results has to come, because or else it doesn't make any difference then.
Now, this week will be the Dutch Darts Masters in Maastricht. How important is it for you going into Thursday to qualify for your home nation's event?
It will be, of course, a very good achievement to play in front of your own crowd. Is always the best feeling there is, because the Dutch people are at the moment, they're great. They love the darts. Every time something is organized, it's packed and it's full. So you want to play in front of those crowds. But I think the main thing for me now is to qualify for the European Championship. So it's an important qualifier for me to stay in the top 32 of the European order of merit.
Now, right now, this is the only event in the Netherlands. There's 8 or 9 in Germany, and they're looking to add more. Do you think there might be more PDC events in the Netherlands in the future, or could this just be it?
I hope there will be more in Holland. I think we have the people to do it. We have the crowds to fill it, but it's all about what the PDC wants. I mean, the whole European system has to be done differently, I think, because how it's now organized is just a joke, but that's a completely different subject. I think there should be more tournaments globally. It's not only in Germany and in Holland, but you have to extend and go to different countries to make it there bigger.
There's obviously 5 Dutch players in the top 20 right now, about 6 or 7 in the top 32, including yourself. Who do you think are some of the Dutch players to look out for in the future that you think might be making a big name over the next few years?
That's a hard question. Of course, you have Benito. He's still young, and he's already in the top 16 in the world, and he's somebody to look after. I mean, he's going to have a little bit of form dip, because everybody has that once in a while. But if he comes through that and he becomes better than before, he's going to be a threat. But if you look at the youth players, it's very hard for me to to say, oh, he's very good or he is good, because we don't see the youth players anymore. We only see the players who at the Players Championships or in the Euro Tour. I don't see any youth tournaments.
Now, looking ahead, you said that you're qualifying for the European Championships is a goal. You're currently in the top 32 in that. You're still in with a chance to qualify for the Grand Prix. What would you say are your goals for the remainder of the season?
I said at the beginning of the year, this is a year that I have to improve my back. It has to become better and better, and that happened sooner than I expected. So it then changed a little bit of my goals. I want to play the Championship finals. I want to play the Worlds, and I want to play the European Championship. I set those goals in February, and they're still the same now. And you've got 2 qualifiers for the World Series of Darts finals and the Grand Slam of Darts. So if I win one of them, then it's a bonus. But those 3, I really want to play, and if I play anything else, then it would be just a bonus.
And finally, and the most important question of all, it's now been 3 years since Ajax last won the Eredivisie. Is this their year?
No, I really hope so. We did well in the Europa League last year. We came to the final. We lost to Manchester. This year we didn't even qualify for the European League. So they can put all the focus on Ajax, on the cup, on the league, and hopefully this year we will be champions. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Vincent, and best of luck this weekend in Maastricht.
Thank you very much.
Now moving back to the PDC, and we've returned to Pro Tour action this upcoming weekend with the Dutch Darts Masters. This time, for the first time, it'll be in Maastricht. Normal format for the European Tour. Most of the top players at least most of the top players who normally play the European Tour, including Michael van Gerwen, will be there. Now, of the seeded players, who do you see as being most vulnerable to a first or a second round or third round upset in Maastricht?
Yes, it's an interesting one. I wouldn't say Michael van Gerwen, even though this will be his first tournament since that heavy to Phil Taylor in the World Match Play. But looking further down the list, it's been a long while since a few of these players have played since the World Match Play. All we've had is those 3 World Series events. So it'll be interesting to see what the likes of Rob Cross, Gerwin Price, Christo Reyes, players like that done well, putting some decent performances in the World Match Play to see how they get on. But for me, most vulnerable, I've got to say, Benito van der Plas. He's had a rough time of it over the last few months, not helped by that defeat to Daryl Gurney in the first round in Blackpool, where he had match starts to beat him, and who knows what would have happened after that. But yeah, for me, out of the players there, I'll pick up Benito van der Plas. Maybe Kim Harbrooks as well. We had a disappointing World Match Play as well, so I'll go with them too, just as 2 names to pick out from those top 16 that have been picked for this event.
I definitely agree with those 2. I'll also throw in the players who have just been going to the World Series, assuming they don't withdraw. I mean, you have the 2nd seed in Peter Wright, the 5th seed in Michael Smith, the 9th seed in Daryl Gurney, all coming back from having played those 3 events. Oh, sorry, and the 4th seed, Simon Whitlock, not to forget, the Wizard, as well as Kyle Anderson, who's unseeded, who are all coming back. And that's a long journey back. They've done a lot of traveling recently. Especially Peter Wright, we've seen the travel has taken a bit of a toll on him. But it could take a toll on some of these other players as well, especially if they get a tough draw in the first round or in their second round. You have qualifiers like Steve Beaton, Justin Pipe, who have both been playing well, Richard Dorth in the field, John Henderson. There's a lot of good qualifiers. If they get a tough draw, or one of the host nation players, with all the traveling, I think they could also bite the bullet early. And then again, there's another European Tour event the next week. So hopefully, for their sake, by then they'll be well rested and ready to go.
I've got to make actually, before we move on to talk about the unseeded qualifiers that we know, and that's Peter Wright. It was mentioned on the commentary during Perth that he's going to be going up. Well, he plans about 5 or 6 grams on his darts for this European Tour weekend. So we'll look forward to seeing how he gets on with those. That's a bit of a big jump. But moving on to those unseeded qualifiers that we know about so far, a day before the event kicks off on Friday, we'll have the final qualifiers, the host nation, and the European qualifiers for that. Of the unseeded qualifiers that we know already, who can you see having the best weekend?
I mean, there's a lot of them. Obviously, the ones I just mentioned about if the seeds draw them, they could cause names. I forgot to mention Darren Webster in there, who, of course, has been in phenomenal form recently. Steve Beaton, who I think is due one of these runs on the European Tour. Of the other players, I'm going to go for Jamie Bain. We haven't seen that much of him, but what we've seen so far has been really, really good. He put in a good run on the European Tour recently. He's in with a chance to qualify for the World Championships right now. I think he's just outside those spots. He has a chance to the European Championships if he does a good run here. He's a player who's on the rise, and I've been very impressed with, yes, it's only been a little that I've seen of him, but I've been very impressed with what I've seen. I think if he gets a good draw, I think he could put in another good performance here and build towards a good 2018 season.
Yeah, the two I'm going to pick out, pretty obvious ones really, Carl Anderson and Darren Webster. Carl won his first PDC title last month in the Players' Championships and then followed it up this month with that impressive win in Auckland, his first TV title, a 50-to-1 outsider in that. So he's a player who's going to be going into this hoping to break his duck on the European Tour, I suppose, and make it a hat-trick of titles in 5 or 6 weeks or so. And Darren Webster, the last time we saw him on TV in any tournament at all was the World Match Play when he got to the quarterfinals, beat James Wade in the first round, just ran out Steve Voort in that game against Peter Wright in the quarterfinals, was in a great position, and it just ran away from him. So he's a player who, if he brings that form this weekend, he'll be a player to watch out for. And I'll give a mention to a player we had on the podcast recently, Ryan Searle. He had a great run in one of the Players' Championships recently. He's qualified for this. I think this is his second or third European Tour event that he's qualified for. Hasn't done great on the first two that he's had, but he said his career highlight so far has been playing on these European Tour events. So he's a player who loves playing in these events. So hopefully for him he can have a good run as well.
Yeah, now finally, Monday, the PDC calendar for 2018 came out. Very similar in many regards to this past year, but a couple noticeable changes. As expected, Berlin will be on for Premier League, replacing Brighton. Copenhagen's added to the European Tour event. This will be 13 events. The other new locations are Munich, Graz in Austria, and Zwolle in the Netherlands, replacing Mannheim, Jena, and Vienna. And the European Championships have been moved from Hasselt to Dortmund. The other big change, there's going to be a separate Q school for European players and the UK. What do, of those changes, and as well as others, anything that you find noteworthy that you want to discuss about the calendar?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I got from it, or the most interesting thing, was the European Q school that's going to be introduced in 2018. It's going to go alongside the one in Wigan this January 21st. So be interested to see some more details about that. And I suppose for the players that don't want to come over to Wigan and play in Q school, it's an opportunity for those in Germany and Netherlands and around the area to play that. Try and get World Cup. Wasn't a big secret, and that's the Premier League going to Berlin. A story that we found out was around about this time last year, I think maybe September time. That's just shows how the Premier League has continued to expand. We had the first event in Rotterdam a few years ago. This is the next step, and I think after this we'll see a lot more of the Premier League weeks start to go across Europe and away from the UK. There could be a couple more in Germany, maybe another one in Holland, and then they might look to expand and try other places around Europe as well.
Yeah, I agree that the European Q School is the most interesting thing on the new calendar, and it's tough to say we really know what that's going to be quite yet, because they haven't said anything other than that it's going to happen. And hopefully we can get Matthew Porter or someone from the PDC on next week or in the coming weeks to discuss that in more detail, because until we know what that is it going to be, how many spots is it going to be? Is it going to be the same number of spots? Is it just going to be for 4 or 8 spots? How that's going to entirely to analyze it, but it's an interesting wrinkle added to the schedule for the calendar next year. The other thing, of course, is the Premier League going to Germany. It's not a surprise, but I think it's something we're going to see more of, like you said. Where do they go to next? To Scandinavia, like they're doing with the European Tour. Maybe go to Spain or somewhere where darts isn't yet as big, where they have a player they can sell, but to try to grow the sport. Maybe even take it further east to Russia or something. And even if it's not the same cities every year, even if they mix it up 1 year in Austria, 1 year in Belgium or something, which of course just lost the European Championship, I think this is the direction the PDC is going to go, and I'm interested to see how it goes from there. Anything else for this week?
Just to say, if you got this far on the podcast this week, well done. We've had a few audio issues this week. Hopefully we'll be back to the normal service this week. I'll be next week on holiday, so I won't be here, but Burton, you're about to explain that we've got a ready-made replacement and we're in good hands next week.
Yes, we'll be here with Matthew Kernan, the darting nerd. Of course, you guys have heard some of his interviews from events, mostly the Riley's Qualifier and a couple other events, the Berkshire Open, I believe. He was, of course, this past weekend at the Basingstoke Open, I hope I pronounced that correctly, where he went out to one of our guests, Andy Hamilton, in the first round, and then Andy Hamilton went out to the eventual winner, who's another one of our guests, Diogo Portela, as Portela went on to win the title. So Matthew, I should say, will be filling in for Alex next week. I'll still be here, assuming I haven't flooded and drowned from this hurricane. So we'll see about that. Sorry for the audio issues this week. We knew we were having them as we were recording, and there's not much we can do about it as it is an absolute downpour outside. But thank you guys for listening. For Alex Moss, I am Burton DeWitt, and we and Matthew Kernan will see you guys next week.